I came home unannounced after many years of work and found my father abandoned in a hospital on life support. My mother, brother, and sister were vacationing in Bali with the money I had sent them for my father's treatment, so I froze all their accounts. The plane was descending over familiar fields, and my heart was beating faster and faster. I'd always thought that if I came back one day, I'd see Bloomville exactly as I'd left it. The old bridge over the river, the sign for Ellie's Bakery with the peeling paint, the equally slow cabs at the train station, and that heavy, sticky air, as if dust and damp had made a pact never to leave the city. But once I took the first step outside the airport, it was clear. It had changed, too. Or was it me? Maybe it was me who was a stranger here. The airport greeted me with the resounding echo of my own footsteps. The arrivals hall seemed smaller than in my memory, as if my childhood memories had inflated it to the size of a cathedral, and now it had shrunk to an ordinary provincial terminal with cracked linoleum and yellow daylight bulbs. An elderly woman in a uniform blouse dozed at the information desk, and next to her stood a sign that read, "Welcome to Bloomville, the heart of the state." The heart of the state. I grinned. If this is the heart, the state is long overdue for a heart surgeon. No one greeted me, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Didn't say a word, not to my mother, not to Cindy, not to Troy. I just bought a ticket and flew out. The decision came suddenly, like something that had been brewing for a long time, but was just now bursting forth. 3 days ago, I was sitting in my apartment in Lisbon, looking out at the ocean through the panoramic windows, and I suddenly realized, I can no longer live in limbo. I can no longer pretend that sending money is a sufficient substitute for being present. As I rode in the cab, I stared out the windows. Everything seemed both familiar and impersonal at the same time. The small houses, the drugstore signs, the creaky stops, it was as if Bloomville was suspended in some eternal dream. The cab driver, an older man with sparse gray hair, glanced at me occasionally in the rearview mirror. "Are you from around here?" he finally asked. "I used to be," I replied. "Oh, I see. A lot of people leave. Few come back." He was silent for a moment, then added, "And you should. It's a nice place. Quiet. Quiet. Yeah, Bloomville was always quiet. Too quiet. When I was a kid, that quiet seemed like a prison. I dreamed of the noise of the big cities, the hustle and bustle, the time when every minute would have meaning. Now, looking at the familiar streets, I thought, maybe silence is not a punishment, but a gift that I was too young to appreciate. The weather matched the mood. A low gray sky, as if the city had forgotten what the sun was. It was drizzling light rain, the kind of fall rain that makes everything blurry and sad. I pressed my face against the cold glass and suddenly remembered how, as a child, I used to draw hearts on the fogged car windows with my finger. Back then, every trip seemed like an adventure, even if it was just to the grocery store. The house was just as I remembered it, only a little dimmer. I stood in front of the gate, holding my suitcase, hesitant to enter. It seemed like just a house, wooden, with a peeling porch and patches on the steps that my father patted every summer. But my heart beat as if someone was waiting outside the door. The garden gate creaked familiarly, the same sound that had seen me off to school every morning 18 years ago. The path to the house was strewn with yellow leaves, crunching underfoot like old photographs. The porch looked even more dilapidated than in my memories. The boards were sagging, the paint was peeling, and the old swing my father had hung for Cindy and me was now hanging from a single chain. I pressed the bell, several times, silence. At first, I thought they hadn't heard. But there was no car in the driveway. The windows were empty, no rustling. The house had that special emptiness that only abandoned places have. I walked along the side of the house and knocked again, louder. The kitchen window still had the same faded floral curtains my mother had hung when I was a teenager. Only now they seemed sad instead of cozy. Someone stirred on the other side of the neighboring fence. "Michelle?" It sounded familiar. "Is that you?" I turned around. Mrs. Harvey, the same one who'd lived in the neighborhood for as long as I could remember. She was wearing an apron and gardening gloves, just like she had 20 years ago. It was as if time had stopped for her. She looked almost exactly the same, except her hair had turned completely gray and her back was slightly bent. You're here. She squinted in surprise. Nobody was expecting you. Yeah, I didn't warn you. Mrs. Harvey moved closer to the fence, wiping her hands on her apron. There was a look of concern on her face, which she tried to hide behind a neighborly smile. And you didn't, she faltered. You didn't know? About what? She hesitated, as if she hoped I'd tell her. There was that peculiar caution in her eyes, the way people choose their words before breaking bad news. Your father was taken away a week ago, to the hospital. Neighbors called an ambulance. He fell in the yard. They said he had a heart attack or something. I thought you'd all be out there by now. The world has moved on, a week ago. A week he's been in the hospital and I didn't know anything. I was silent, trying to digest the information. My voice shook. Where is he? County Hospital, Ward 3, ICU. I wrote it down. You wait, I'll get it. But I'd already turned and walked toward the road. I called a cab. I couldn't feel my legs. Dad, in the hospital, alone. And no one said anything. Not Mom, not Cindy, not Troy, no one. As the car drove, I looked out the window, but I couldn't see anything. My ears were pounding. It was hard to breathe. I pulled out my phone and tried my family again. Mom, answering machine. Cindy, caller disconnects. Troy, unavailable. It was like they'd all disappeared off the face of the earth just when I needed them most. The hospital greeted me with a familiar cocktail of smells. Antiseptic, plastic, cold, and that special smell of human fear that no air freshener can beat. The ICU was quiet, except for the constant hum of the machines and the occasional beeping of the monitors. I walked down the corridor, unable to feel my fingers. The signs blurred before my eyes. Ward 3. Finally. My heart skipped a beat. I stopped in front of the door, gathering my strength. Behind the door was my father, whom I hadn't seen in almost 2 years, who I called once every few months, more out of obligation than any real desire to talk. Now he's lying there, alone, maybe dying, and I'm standing here, afraid to go in. I opened the door. He was lying there, small, pale, with transparent skin on which blue veins were showing. The machines buzzed, the IVs pulled as if they were holding him in this world by strings. Eyes closed, cheeks sunken, nothing on the nightstand, no pictures, no notes, no flowers, no sign that he mattered to anyone. It was the scariest moment to see my father not as the strong man who once seemed like a giant who could protect me from all the ills of the world, but as a frail old man clinging to life with the help of machines. His arms that had once lifted me to the ceiling now lay motionless on top of the hospital blanket, thin and pale, bruised from the IVs. I stepped closer, stood at the foot of the bed. My throat constricted. It was as if he had shrunk. Even his chin, always shaven, was overgrown with gray stubble. His hospital shirt was bunched up, one sleeve rolled up crooked. It all looked as if he was just a body here, not a person. A nurse came in without noticing me at first. She was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and the usual movements of someone who had seen too much grief. She saw me and stopped. Are you a relative? Daughter, I said. Oh my God, someone's finally here. I could hear the genuine relief in her voice. We'd been trying to contact the family, but no one was responding. We had the papers, but the numbers. She faltered. He was admitted in serious condition. He's stable for now, but the prognosis is unclear. Who visited him? No one. Not a single visit since he was hospitalized. He was admitted as an unaccompanied minor. Those words hurt more than seeing his father in a hospital bed. No one. Not a single visit. A week he lies here alone, and where's the family? I didn't answer. I just sat down on the chair by the bed, took his hand. It was warm, but I could feel it wasn't his warmth. It was the machinery warming him, the system. It was so light, like a bird's foot. I remembered those hands as strong, working hands, fixing my bike, teaching me how to tie my shoelaces, stroking my head when I felt bad. They left him alone. I pulled out my phone. My hands shook with anger and despair, dialed my mother's number. It rang. Then an answering machine. Mom's voice, cheerful and upbeat. Hi, "We're not home, but leave a message and we'll be sure to call you back." Dialed Cindy. No answer. She hung up right away. Dialed Troy. No answer. In desperation, I opened Instagram. Cindy has a story. Beach, coconut, smile ear to ear. Day 3. Bali, your space. My fingers trembled. I flipped through the rest of the book. Mom was there too. In the shade, under a hat, with some kind of tropical cocktail in her hand. The caption from Cindy. Family reunion. We deserve it. Family. With my money. I leafed on, as if in a dream. Pictures of the luxury hotel, spa treatments, restaurants. And in the comments, friends writing, "What a great time. You deserve a vacation." And what a friendly family. A close-knit family. Who left my dad to die alone. I sat in the room and felt something inside me turn over. For too long I had lived up to other people's expectations. For too long I'd thought that support was my duty. That if I didn't send money, I'd be a bad daughter, a bad sister. Meanwhile, they were spending my money on a dream vacation while my father lay in the hospital with no visitors. I pulled out my laptop, logged into online banking. One by one, I blocked all auto transfers. My father's medical card, where the payments were going, was disabled. Donations to the caregiver stopped. There was no mention of a paid aid in the reports. There were too many lies. I examined bank statements for the last 6 months. It turned out that the money I'd wired for my father's treatment had been regularly withdrawn in cash, in large sums, on the same days that Cindy was posting pictures from expensive restaurants and my mom was buying new clothes. Even the medication money I wired marked urgent for Dad went to anything but treatment. I went upstairs. I found the head of the ward. I gave her the power of attorney I'd once signed just in case. I asked her to transfer my father to a facility I knew. I'd started my career there as a student. People I trusted. He won't be alone. The director, a strict woman of pre-retirement age, scrutinized the documents. "Transfer is possible," she said at last. "But it will be expensive. A private clinic, individualized care." "Money is not a problem," I interrupted. "The main thing is that he should be watched. He doesn't have to be alone." "I understand." Her eyes flashed with sympathy. Unfortunately, such situations are not uncommon. Elderly people are often abandoned. I stopped by the house on the way home. Fortunately, the key was in the same place, under an old flower pot on the porch. The house greeted me with the smell of dust and sadness. I walked through the rooms, picking up my father's things. I took my father's blanket, the same plaid one he used to read under in the evenings. His book, an old edition of European history, with bookmarks on every 10th page and notes in the margins. His old rimmed glasses, his warm socks knitted by his grandmother. A small frame with a picture of us together, me about 10 years old, him young, us standing by the lake, both of us smiling. I took it all to his room. There was something on the bedside table now, little signs that he had a daughter who loved him. On the second day, he opened his eyes. I was just reading aloud to him from his favorite book, a biography of Churchill that he reread every few years. When I saw his eyelids flutter, I stopped talking. "Hi, Daddy. It's me, Michelle." He looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to focus, to see if this was a dream or reality. Then his lips trembled. He was trying to smile. He couldn't speak because of the oxygen mask, but I saw the corners of his lips quiver. And that was enough. There was such gratitude in his eyes, such relief, that I could barely hold back the tears. He squeezed my hand, weakly, but he did. I realized he thought he was going to die alone, that no one would come. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'm not leaving." No one called. The family disappeared. It wasn't until 24 hours later that I got a text from Cindy. "What are you doing? The accounts are frozen. Is this blackmail?" I looked at that message and I couldn't believe it. Not, "How's Dad?" or "What happened to him?" but accounts frozen. Even now, with Dad in the hospital, all she cares about is money. I didn't answer. In the evening, a text came from my mother. "We just took a break. You haven't been around for years. You have no right to judge us." A pause. They called it a pause. While my father dies alone, they take a pause from family duties. And they dare to accuse me of not being there for them. I wasn't there, but I sent money. I called. I asked them how they were doing. And they lied and spent my money on their own pleasures. I read this and felt a wave rise under my ribcage. Not anger even, but some thick black clarity. I really didn't judge them. I just had enough. In the morning, I was back in the room. He was asleep, but he was breathing more evenly. The doctor said the progress is positive. The main thing is rest, care, and time. Your father is a strong man, the doctor said. He has every chance to recover. It's good that you came. The presence of loved ones is very important in cases like this. Close. The closest person is me, alone. The others turned out not to be close, but just people who lived under the same roof once upon a time. I stroked his forehead. You deserve more than their silence, Dad. You deserve someone to be there for you. I will be. I will now, as long as I can. When I first left Bloomville, I was 22. It felt like I was running for my life when I was actually running away from it. I was running away from the stifling silence of the small town, from the stares of my neighbors, from the expectations of my family, from the feeling that if I stayed, I would be stuck in this quagmire of provincial life forever. Chicago was noisy, heavy, frightening. I slept on a cot in a room with a peeling ceiling, ate on coupons, and scrubbed floors for night cleaning crews until I got a job as an emergency room nurse. At the time, I thought any life was better than the one that awaited me in Bloomville. The first shifts were a nightmare. People screaming, bleeding, dying. The head nurses looked down on them. The doctors didn't notice. Nobody remembered my name. I was just a shape, hands, body. But I held on. I held on because I knew I could either hold out now or I'd just rot in these cheap rooms, calling my mom at night, pretending everything was okay. And there were calls. Every night. Mom would say, "Well, honey, did you find someone? Or are you still single?" I would take off my blood-stained gloves and try to think of an answer that wouldn't sound like a scream. Sometimes I'd answer simply, "Too much work, Mom." She sighed and switched to the news from home. "Cindy's getting a job at the salon. She's doing well, finally found herself." Or, "Troy bought a car. It's on credit, but we're proud of him. He's so self-sufficient." Never a word about me. I was there on the other end of the line, like I was in another dimension. I became something like a bank with resources. If you need support, they'll call, just for fun. No. I didn't complain. I didn't write letters. I sent a handwritten postcard once. "Hello from Chicago. Learning to live again. Love you." She never wrote back. I later learned that the card had gotten lost among the advertising brochures, and when my mom found it, she decided it was too late to respond. When 2 years later I moved to the position of a junior nurse, I felt for the first time that I could breathe. I had my first decent money. I rented a cockroach-free studio, started eating warm food instead of dry snacks from a vending machine. I bought my first decent shoes in 5 years. And then the call came again. Dad was diagnosed. Something with nerves. His hands are shaking. Mother's voice was as calm as ever, almost detached. The doctor said it might be Parkinson's. I remember sitting down on the steps outside the hospital. It was evening. The air was warm. Everything inside me froze. Daddy. My daddy, who was always so strong, so reliable, who never shook his hands, even when he was so upset. So what now? Well, you need medication, counseling. I went to the insurance office, but the lines were so long. I thought maybe you could. I said yes, of course, without even asking how much. I was still afraid they'd say, "You're gone, you're no longer ours." From then on, the money came regularly. First hundreds, then more. I started saving for my treatment, not for my life. I minimized my spending on myself. I gave up vacations. I sold my car and took public transportation, all to make my dad better. When Dad got worse, I found a caregiver. Or at least I thought I did. My mom sent a contact. I wired the money. Everything seemed to make sense. Mom reported back regularly. The caregiver is good. Dad is comfortable with her. She's helping him with his medications. She's taking him for walks. He's cheerful. Cindy sometimes wrote, "We have everything under control. Thank you, sis. You're an angel." It seemed odd because Cindy couldn't speak without innuendo, but I took it as an attempt at reconciliation. Probably stupid. Troy was silent. Total ignorance. If he responded, it was belatedly, briefly. Okay. Got it. Thank you. He was always in the background, even as a kid. Everything happened around him, and he was like an observer. He still is, though. At some point, I stopped checking what the money was going to. It was just a habit. Automatic care. First of every month, a transfer for medical expenses. 15th of the month for a caregiver. The 20th for medication. I didn't know it was a lie, that it was just convenient to have someone to send, silent, not prying, not demanding reports. I went to New York 5 years after Chicago. There, I was offered a coordinator position at a large hospital. 3 times the salary, benefits, career prospects. I moved, got a tiny but bright apartment in Brooklyn. Everything seemed possible at the time. My mom said, "You're getting serious, Michelle. All by yourself?" As if that defined value, as if a woman without a man was something inferior, incomplete. And then the pandemic. And I was among those who slept on cots in the hospital. We were losing 10 people a night. I didn't cry. I didn't have time. Just fixing, assisting, holding hands. After my shift, shower, coffee, back in the fight. It was in those months that I realized what real fatigue was. Not the kind of fatigue where you're tired of work and want to go home and watch a soap opera. It's when you're tired of life. When every morning is a feat, just getting up and going out to save people, knowing you won't save many. I didn't call then. Not my mom, not Cindy. I didn't want to hear their superficial words. Everything that was happening didn't fit into a normal life. How do you explain to someone who's complaining about a canceled vacation that you stayed up 3 days in a row holding the hands of dying old people? After the pandemic, I allowed myself a vacation for the first time. I went to Portugal. That's where I made the decision to stay abroad. The job offered me a contract with a Portuguese hospital in Lisbon. Good conditions, beautiful city, ocean outside the window. I said yes. Since then, letters, money, sometimes boxes of holiday gifts. But no talking. I rarely called, and every conversation was like polite conversation with strangers. How are you? Fine. How's your health? Still hanging in there. Good. I'll wire the money tomorrow. When Mom called, it sounded like a check, not interest. Are you okay? Good for you. By the way, we need a new bed. Dad's back hurts. And I was translating again. Because I was an automaton. Because it was easier that way than listening. You're not around. But there was always a shadow inside. Fear. That one day I'd come back and it would be too late. Or too soon. And then, that summer, I just couldn't take it anymore. I woke up in the morning in my apartment in Lisbon and saw another picture from Cindy. My parents are so nice today. Dad forgot where he was going as usual. We laughed. And I suddenly realized, I'm not laughing. I don't remember his laugh. I'm not sure I know his face now. I'm transferring money to a man who is becoming more and more abstract, more and more distant. I'm not a daughter. I'm a sponsor. I bought a ticket. I flew out, without a word. And I ended up in Bloomville, where Daddy's in a room, alone, where the only laughter is the beeping of answering machines, where my mother and Cindy laugh under palm trees, and I sit in a hospital room holding the hand of a man who could have died before his family. The transfer to private hospice went smoothly. I did all the paperwork, got a private room that smelled not of chlorine, but of lavender, where there were real sheets, where the old machines didn't buzz. When he was transported, he was almost unconscious. But when we were in the new room, he opened his eyes. I sat down next to him, took his hand. It's me. You're home, Dad. Not home in the literal sense, but home in the sense that there's someone who loves him. He looked, slowly, inwardly, as if through time. And I could see he recognized me. A tear rolled down his cheek. I don't know if it was his or mine. I stayed in the room that night, not because I had to, but because I couldn't leave. The nurse brought a cot. Can I stay here tonight? I asked. Of course. Family should be around. Family. I am his family. Turns out family isn't the ones who carry your last name. Family is who stays behind when the going gets tough. I watched him sleep, breathing, holding my hand, like when I was a kid, when I was afraid of thunderstorms. Then he said, "It's okay, Michelle. I'm here. I always will be." And he kept it. Now it was my turn. I knew they were back by the sound of the car door. Not the old, dusty Toyota that was still in the driveway outside my father's house, but a brand new rented Audi I hadn't seen before. The car stopped abruptly, as if someone inside was already seething. I stood on the porch, unmoving. Morning dew sparkled on the grass, the sun cutting into my eyes. My heart pounded. Not from fear. That part was over. Cindy came out first. Grown-out dark roots, tan, sunglasses, loose white shirt. Rested, yet angry. Then Mom, brimmed hat, bright lipstick, a summer dress I didn't recognize. Finally Troy, hands in jeans pockets, eyes down, same sullen look. They froze when they saw me. The air felt charged. "Did you decide to wait for us?" Mom added, coming closer. "How unexpected. Usually you just disappear." "You've arrived," I said. "Good." The words were like rocks, dense, unmovable. I could feel each word weighing before it left my lips. "Where's Dad?" Troy finally looked up. "We want to go visit him." I looked at him. Eyes faded. The words were foreign, like they were memorized. His mom must have made him say it. "Do you want to?" How many days after he was admitted to the hospital? Cindy rolled her eyes and stepped closer. "Michelle, that's enough. We were only gone for a week. We knew he wasn't in critical condition, and so what?" I stepped closer, and she stepped back involuntarily. That he was under observation? That he had a nurse? Mom squinted, studying my face. Her gaze was wary. "Isn't he?" I pulled out the folder I'd prepared the night before. Everything was already prepared. Printouts of the translations, the documents, answers from the company my mother said was providing care. "You sent the money, yes," I said slowly, looking my mother in the eye. But the caregiver didn't exist. No reports, no visits. The last name you listed is off the books. The address is unattended. That money went to nothing. This is absurd. Mom grabbed the paper and started looking at it. I called them personally. They took the money, reported the work. When? Well, she hesitated, shifting her gaze from the document to me. "Cindy, don't put this on me," Cindy said sharply. "You're the one who made the arrangements. I don't know any caregivers at all. I didn't say anything. I let them talk. Let them drown in their own lies." "Look," Troy tried to interject. "There's an explanation for all this. We didn't do it on purpose." "You didn't mean to leave your father alone in the room?" I turned to him. "Not on purpose to post a story with a cocktail in front of the ocean on a day when he was barely breathing?" "We didn't know," he mumbled, averting his gaze. "We did." Cindy stepped closer, her face contorted with anger. "You know what your problem is, Michelle? You think sending money makes you a hero. But you left. You weren't with us. You don't know what it's like to be around." "To be there and look away?" "We've been dragging this whole time," she shouted, and the neighbors' windows must have shaken at the sound of her voice. "You were just paying us off. Your transfers aren't caring. They're handouts so you don't feel guilty." Mom didn't say a word, but I could see in her eyes that she agreed. In her gaze, she could see the justification for everything they were doing. "Yes, I left," I said slowly. "But I wasn't lying. I didn't pretend. I didn't post happy pictures while he lay alone. I didn't spend money on tickets to Bali while he couldn't get out of bed." They froze. The air became thick, tense. "Do you want to know how much went out?" I opened the next sheet. From December through March, $12,000 transferred. Of that, only $3,000 were documented for medical expenses. The rest was withdrawn in cash, cashed out at local ATMs. Here are the statements. Cindy blushed to the roots of her hair. "What do you want now? Give the money back? Get a thank you?" "No, I want you to stop lying, at least to yourselves." "You don't get to judge us," Mom whispered, and there was so much hatred in her voice that I shuddered. "You ran away. You left first." "Yes, and it was my mistake, but I'm here now. You're here temporarily." "We'll see." The silence lingered. Somewhere in the next yard, a dog barked. A car drove by, tires rustling on the asphalt. Dad's in hospice, I said at last. Where I used to work. He's getting care, real care. On me. No lies. And you decided to be his saintly daughter? Cindy grinned, and there was so much venom in that grin. After 18 years? No, I just couldn't keep quiet anymore. Mom turned away, looking somewhere in the direction of the old oak tree we used to play hide and seek under when we were kids. You've always been awkward. Everything about you is an accusation. Everything about me is fatigue. I'm tired of pretending you're family. What are we then? I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I didn't know. Random people connected by blood? People who used each other? People who once loved but forgot how? Later, in the hospice room, it was quiet. The machines hummed softly. The sun came through the blinds, painting streaks on the floor. Dad was asleep, but his breathing was even and his complexion better than yesterday. I sat down beside him, took his hand. They're back, I whispered. It's still the same, only I'm not the same. He didn't open his eyes, but his fingers trembled, barely perceptible, but trembling. I haven't run away, Daddy. I'm here for you. He smiled weakly, or so I thought. And in that moment, for the first time, I felt that I wasn't late. I was on time. I remembered that morning by the smell. Not the silence, not the light, but the smell. The window was ajar, and it smelled of cold dampness and flowers, though flowers couldn't grow there. The hospice was almost on the side of the highway, next to empty fields and an abandoned grain elevator. But the smell was there, and it was etched in my memory forever. I woke up earlier than usual. That night I almost didn't sleep. I listened to the noise of the machines, to the drops of the drip, to his breathing. It became shallow, as if disappearing. Not anxious, no, just as if silent in itself. She came up quietly, sat down beside him. His hand was on the sheet, narrow, light, with pale fingers, as if molded from old paper. I put my palm on top. It was warm, but not like before. There was something in that warmth from the radiators in the old house, not alive, but not yet dead. He took a breath, a very slow one, hoarse, and then another, and silence, not harsh, quiet silence. No pathos, no bouncing on the monitor, no signal. There was just no breathing. I didn't pull my hand away. I didn't scream. I didn't call the nurse right away. I just sat there, like he was asleep, like I was waiting for him to sigh and turn his head and say, "You stayed after all." But he didn't. Time stopped, or seemed to stop. I sat and watched his face, calm, relaxed, without the pain that had appeared in the last few days. He looked peaceful. Finally. A few minutes later, a nurse walked in, the same young girl who worked the night shift and always smiled. She wasn't smiling now. She looked at me and knew right away. She came over and checked my pulse. She was quiet. "Were you with him?" I nodded. He left quietly, very. "I know," I said. Then the doctor came in. Then the junior staff. Papers, paperwork. The formalities that must be observed when a person goes from being a patient to being deceased. Someone brought water. I didn't take any. I stood at the window and watched the fall leaves tearing off the tree, clinging to the air as if they didn't want to fall. When they took him away, I followed. I didn't cry. I didn't talk. Just walked. The nurse took me by the arm. "You did the best you could," she said. He wasn't alone. Later, I called a car. Not home, to the funeral home. I picked out everything myself. The coffin was simple, light wood, no fancy decorations. Clothes, his old jacket with leather patches on the elbows, the same plaid shirt he wore to parent-teacher conferences and family gatherings. I washed it just before he moved into hospice. It smelled of soap and a little bit of that old closet where it always hung. I organized it all by myself, without them. No calls, no discussions, no asking for opinions. Only at the end, when the date and time were confirmed, did I text Cindy and Mom. I texted Troy later, sent the same message to all three. Daddy died. Funeral Friday at 10 a.m. ceremony at the hospice chapel. No memorial service. He didn't want it. No one answered for the first 24 hours. Then came a text from my mom. "Okay?" One word. Good. Like it was about a coffee shop meeting and not her husband's funeral. Friday, I was early, at dawn. The doors were already open. The coffin stood in the center of the room, covered with a thin white cloth. In the corner, a photograph. My father, 40 years ago, with a book in his hand and a kind smile. I found this picture by accident, in a box of letters in his dresser. He was alive in it, smiling, not the way he'd been remembered in recent months. People started coming over, a couple of neighbors, an old man, a colleague of Dad's from the college where Dad once taught history, a young woman, a nurse on the ward, a few people I didn't know, but who knew Dad. I greeted everyone with a look. I spoke softly, thanked them for coming. The family arrived 10 minutes before it started. I heard footsteps. I turned around. Mom was wearing a black suit, like she was in a business meeting. Hat and veil, dark lipstick. Cindy's in a black dress with a high neckline, her hair in a tight bun. Troy, in a dark jacket, crumpled shirt, staring at the floor. They walked through without saying a word. They sat in the third row, away from the coffin. I didn't turn around again. I spoke during the ceremony. Not as a daughter, not as an organizer, just as someone who had been there for him in his last days. He was a quiet man, I said, looking at his picture. He didn't explain, he did. He didn't demand, he showed. He didn't teach life, he lived it in a way that made you want to be like him. He didn't force us to be better, but he made us want to be better. And he always knew when to just sit down and be quiet. After I said that, I couldn't talk anymore. My voice shook, and I sat down. Cindy didn't come up after the ceremony. Mom didn't either. Only Troy, walking by, whispered, "You did the right thing." I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. After the funeral, I didn't go straight back to the house. I went to the lawyer's office first. The will was in a sealed folder. The lawyer, an elderly man with kind eyes, opened the envelope in front of me. Everything was simple. All the property, the house, furniture, books, land, passed to me. No encumbrances, no conditions. "He wrote this 3 years ago," the lawyer said. "He said he felt you'd come back one day, and that the house should be a place where you'd feel safe." Did he say that out loud? He didn't, but you could tell it was a big decision for him. He thought about it for a long time, read it over several times. I signed the papers. I got the copies. I went outside. The light was warm, September. The leaves were beginning to fall. The air smelled of earth and fallen leaves, the smell of fall that I remembered from my childhood. I returned to my father's house in the evening. The hallway smelled of dust and peppermint. I'd left the window open that morning to air it out. I took off my shoes, went into the kitchen, and poured myself some water from the same glass I'd drunk from as a child. I sat down at the cracked old table, and for the first time I realized, this was my home now. Not a temporary shelter, not a place I'd come to for a little while. It was mine. I spent all night cleaning. Not out of want, out of need. I couldn't sleep. Ransacking closets, going through papers. I found albums with pictures of my childhood. Dad with the beard he wore when I was little. Mom in her kitchen robe, smiling. Cindy small, laughing, with pigtails. Troy with a toy gun, serious as an adult. And me. In a school dress, with a skewed bow. Staring at the camera furtively, as if I were resisting. On the back of one photo, my dad wrote, "Can't pose, too real." I fell asleep in the morning, right on the couch, hugging the pillow from his chair. It still smelled of his cologne. The next day, around noon, the doorbell rang. I opened it. Mom was standing on the doorstep. "Can I come in?" I didn't answer. I just stepped back. She came in. She looked around and sat by the window, the same place she used to like to sit. "Cindy and I were discussing," she began. "The house?" I asked. "Yeah, it's in the family." "No, it's mine now. It's not fair. It's his decision. You're always dividing everything into truth and lies, Michelle, and life isn't black and white." "Then don't call lies family." She paused, studying my face as if she was seeing me for the first time. "You're not going to stay here, are you?" "I am. You've had a life, New York, a career, abroad, and now a corner drugstore and a house with a story." She looked at me weird, like someone who was suddenly a stranger. "Why did you even come back?" To say goodbye. To him. She stood up. She didn't say goodbye, she just left. A day later, Cindy came in. "I'm not going to pretend," she said from the doorway. "I'm angry. I feel cheated." "Because you didn't get your share?" "Because I thought we were together." "We weren't. We were just living under the same roof once. And now you're alone and you think you're better than us?" "I don't think I'm better than us. I just stayed when you left." She left too, no tears, just a grudge in her shoulders. Troy didn't come. He texted, "If you need help with repairs, let me know." I didn't answer. For the first few weeks, it was like I was living in silence. I heard every creak of the floorboards, every strike of the clock in the kitchen. In the evening, I made soup for one person, listened to the radio, lay on the couch with a book. I sorted through Dad's papers, wrote lists in a notebook. What to throw away, what to keep, what to give to charity. A week later, she walked into the corner drugstore. "Do you need an employee?" I asked the woman behind the counter. "You're Michelle, right?" She squinted her eyes. "Randall's daughter. He told me about you. You worked in medicine, right?" "Yeah, hospital coordinator. But I have a pharmacy license, still valid." She didn't ask why I came back. She just handed me a form. "We do shift work. It's not great for the money, but it's a good team." I signed a contract. I left with the feeling that I was returning not only to my hometown, but also to myself. Working at the pharmacy was simple, but necessary. People came in with prescriptions, with questions, with fatigue. I knew how to talk to them. No sugarcoating. No lying about how everything was going to be okay. Just be in the moment. After a few days, I started to recognize faces. One pensioner always bought vitamins, but he didn't know why. The doctor prescribed them, but he didn't ask. One woman took psoriasis cream for her husband, whom no one saw. He never left the house. One teenager came in for a Band-Aid, but stayed to talk about college and the future. I could feel it, the ground beneath my feet. Finally. Evenings brought neighbors, pie, garden apples, quiet, "How are you?" I mostly listened. One day, Mrs. Harvey arrived with a box from her closet, my father's books, papers, letters. Among them, a yellowed envelope, "Michelle if." I left it untouched for days, afraid. When rain came, I opened it. In shaky but familiar handwriting. "If you're reading this, you're back. Don't be afraid to stay. You're needed. Thank you. Dad, always." I sat holding it, silent. The day after the letter, I woke up earlier than usual. It was cool. The fall fog was creeping through the streets, sticking to the glass. I opened the window, breathed in, and for the first time I felt that I could breathe easier here. Not freely, not easily, but easier. I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on. I made my usual breakfast, toast, eggs, coffee, just like he did. Dad was a simple eater, but he had one ritual. Breakfast is the time when the day starts right. No rush. There was that note on the windowsill. I didn't put it away. I left it as a reminder, like an anchor. There were a lot of people in the pharmacy that day. The weather was pressing. Everyone had headaches, insomnia, anxiety. I was on automatic, but I felt like I was part of something. I didn't feel temporary. Toward evening, a man walked in, about 50 years old, polite, neat, with a folder in his hands. I noticed the real estate agency logo on his shirt. "Excuse me, are you Michelle River?" "Yes, I represent your mother. She asked me to give you the market value of your house, if you change your mind." I didn't take the folder, I just looked at it. "I'm not selling, I'm not discussing it. I don't revisit it." He nodded, said he understood. Walked away. I went outside after my shift, and for the first time in a long time, walked without a purpose. Just walking through the neighborhood. Past the school where Cindy and Troy and I went to. By the old station where my dad worked before he started teaching college. Past the pond where he and I once fed the ducks. I was a teenager then, angry, silent, and he just sat next to me and tossed crumbs. I stopped at the bench. It was the same there. Only there was less water, and the ducks had disappeared somewhere. There was a dry leaf on the bench. I picked it up. I looked up at the sky, and I thought, I'm here. Not for them. Not in spite of them. I'm here because I stayed. because I didn't run away. That evening at home, I opened my father's drawer. There was an old pen, the same pen he always used to sign his reports. I took out a blank piece of paper. I wrote one line on it. I stayed. I folded it up and put it in the drawer, next to his letter. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I was no longer a guest. This is my home now, my life, and my silence. I'm used to measuring time not by dates, but by smells. Spring smells like raw clay from under melted snow and wet roots. June smells like hot asphalt and blooming linden trees. July smells like daisies crushed in the sun and mown grass. Now comes the most nameless time, the interval between the early lilac blossoms and the first yellow leaves, when the air seems clear to the point of ringing. I wake up and realize no alarm clock will show this gap. It can only be inhaled. On the way to the drugstore, I began to stop at each new sprout. A small lime tree sprouted by the side of the road. I touched the tiny leaves with the palm of my hand and felt their cool, velvety softness. Maybe in 20 years, the tree will be big and give shade to someone walking the same path. We rarely think of people 20 years from now, but trees remember every passerby. At the drugstore, Judy and I have made a new rule. Anyone who waits longer than 5 minutes gets a glass of water with lemon. We buy the lemon with our own money, it's pennies, but people smile as if they had received a gift. I know that it's not the lemon that matters, it's the attention. When my father adjusted the collar of my school uniform, it took him a second, but I remembered it all day long. After my shift, I went to the city archives to look for old plans of the property across the river. The archivist brought a bundle tied with twine and warned me that the papers were crumbling. I untied the knot and saw my dad's pencil marks. He dreamed of building a trail there for botany students. I ran my finger along the line. It smudged a little, like a dusty shadow. Maybe I should finalize his idea. Clear the path, put up signs with the Latin names of the plants. I'm not an educator, but I can be a memory keeper. In the evening, while the pie dough was rising under a towel, I went out on the porch to touch the sky. It was warm, damp, and the stars seemed to fade into the mist of my own breath. In that moment I realized, loneliness is not destroyed by noise, it dissolves in watching. It is enough to look, and you are not alone, because the world responds with the flicker of a firefly or the whisper of the wind. A tent market has appeared behind the highway. My neighbors call me to sell pies on Saturdays. I haven't decided, but mentally I can already see the table, a linen tablecloth, a sign that reads, apple, warm, and a cup for change. Not for money, but for smiles. People smile more easily when they buy something. I'll cut the pie into even slices, and maybe someone will ask for the recipe, and I'll say, the secret is not to spare the cinnamon. When I was a kid, I did. Now I don't. A thunderstorm came in the night. The power went out in the house, and I felt no fear, only a resounding joy. The candles were found at once, the matches hadn't dried out, and the rain on the roof sounded like the drums of a distant holiday. I sat on the kitchen floor and counted the seconds between the flash and the thunder. In the pauses, I could hear my own pulse. It was steady. I used to experience thunderstorms at airports, listening to the delay reports. Now, I listen to them at home, where every drop falls precisely on my roof. On the third day after the storm, I went to the river to check the bridge. The planks were intact, but the railing was blackened from the rain. I took out a bucket of paint and a brush and began to slowly coat the wood. The paint was thick. The smell of solvent conjured up memories of the school workshop. The world shrank to the movement of the brush, the rustle of water under the bridge, and the distant chirping of cicadas. As the sun slanted down, the railing turned as white as a fresh leaf. I sat down and noticed that my palms were splattered too. It looked as if I wore the marks of my work like a tattoo. Back home, I received an email from Lisbon. An old colleague invited me to give a lecture on hospital logistics at an international conference. I read it, smiled, and carefully placed the envelope in the severed box. Lisbon is part of the old me. I am grateful for it, but I don't have to go back. I'll leave the lectures to those who are running ahead. I'm learning to stand still for now and find movement in that. I've decided to start studying herbs in earnest. I enrolled in an online course, bought a notebook, and signed it, phytotherapy, and small discoveries. I draw St. John's wort on the first page and thyme on the second. I'm not an artist, but the lines are drawn with confidence, as if my hand remembers that herbs are the nerve of the earth system. In the mornings before work, I write one sentence of gratitude at a time. Today, grateful for the tile roof. It withstood the night's thunderstorm. Yesterday, grateful for the strange girl who laughed so resoundingly that it cracked my inner ice. These sentences are anchors. If a storm comes up, I'll read and remember. Life is held together by the little things. There was an envelope from Cindy in the mailbox again. I didn't open it. I just ran my finger along the edge, as if checking to see if the corners of the past were sharp. So far, they are, and I'm leaving the letter untouched. Maybe someday the envelope will yellow and the corners will soften, and then I can open it without cutting it. At the pharmacy, we started a little project. A quiet room. 15 minutes of peace for those in panic or grief. I brought in my father's plaid, set up an old lamp, put on a recording of forest sounds. By the time a client comes out of there, they're breathing more evenly. No one asks for a prescription for loneliness, but sometimes a chair covered with a plaid is enough to make the world stop falling apart. At the market, I sold 2 pies after all. Bought a jar of honey from a beekeeper who said, "Every hive has its own accent." I laughed. Bees have accents? He nodded seriously. I realized, people who love their work know how to see nuances. I, too, am learning the accents of silence. Sometimes I think of my father walking beside me as I walk through the garden. It's as if the shadow of a tree becomes a little denser and echoes my step. I don't turn around. I know it's just a memory, but memory isn't always pain. Sometimes it touches like a light breeze. Recently, I discovered an old reel of film. On the box, in large letters, Summer of '94, Picnic. No projector, but I held the film up to the lamp and saw microscopic shots of Mom in a wide-brimmed hat, Troy with corn, Cindy, still a baby, reaching for my hand. Amazing how little squares can hold a whole world. I felt no pain, just a warm touch of the past, as if someone had said, "We were, but that doesn't oblige you to go back." I've made a habit of writing letters that no one will get. I address them to my future self. The first letter begins with the words, "If one day you start to doubt, remember the smell of fresh paint on the river railing." The second, "If you ever want to run away, remember the sound of a tiny lime leaf under your fingers." These letters are navigational lights in case the fog descends again. One night the pharmacy got a call. Accident on the highway. Need bandages. I opened the emergency door, handed over the boxes. One of the paramedics thanked me so hastily that he stuttered. In his eyes, I saw my old self, tired but eager to save. And I realized, you can help without losing yourself. The main thing is to go home to the silence that will explain everything. When I had a day off, I went to a forest plot outside the city. I brought some wildflower seeds, a trowel, and a thermos of tea. I opened the thermos, drank a sip of sweet tea, and began to sow, throwing the seeds as wide as possible. I won't see full bloom this year, but the thought that in a few seasons the meadow will open with bright spots warmed me more than the sun. The world can be built slowly, and that doesn't make the result any less so. That afternoon toward evening, I sat by the fire and began learning to play chords on an old guitar found in the closet. Les listened patiently, even when the string fiddled. The sound was faint, but real, just the kind of sound I needed. Returning, I noticed that the railing of the bridge was slightly scraped. A tourist's backpack had gotten caught somewhere, and I was not upset. Let the paint fall off naturally. It means that the bridge lives. At home, I turned on the lamp, took out a notebook, and wrote, "I am grateful to a stranger tourist for the trace on the paint. He proved that the bridge is needed." Then I added, "Grateful to myself for the ability to see beauty in a peeling board." A book exchange closet opened on the edge of town. I took the management books there, the ones I'd bought in New York when I was pursuing my career. I left a note on the shelf. May these pages help those who are still running. I picked up a collection of Virginia Woolf's letters instead. She walked home, rereading lines about the importance of slowing down if you want to hear your own soul. It's June. It's hot to the point of inaudible tinnitus during the day and smells like heated wood at night. I often sleep with the window open. Sometimes I hear the distant laughter of teenagers, and I smile in my sleep. Let them laugh. It means that the city is breathing. In the drugstore, we started putting on background music, quiet jazz tracks. One woman said it was the first place where she wasn't afraid to take her blood pressure. I realized, melody heals not blood or wounds, but anxiety. I returned at noon and was greeted by the subtle scent of jasmine. My neighbor Martha had left a small potted bush at the door. A note, "For your new beginning." The bush was prickly, with dark green leaves. When I transplanted it by the porch, my hands were dissected by tiny thorns. I smeared balm on them, but the burning reminded me that even beauty has a price, and that's okay. At the end of the month, I checked out of all family group chats. The phone went silent with relief. The black screen now shows only the important stuff, the weather forecast and the pedometer. And inside, it feels like a huge chorus has subsided, and I can finally hear my own voice. I've learned to drink coffee slowly, feeling the bitterness turn to sweetness at the root of my tongue. Coffee used to be fuel. Now it's a conversation with the world. Every morning, I set the mug on the old windowsill, open the window, and say to myself, "Good morning, Michelle. No one is going to take your time today." The town is getting ready for the Harvest Festival. I was invited to set up a table at the entrance to the fair and talk to the kids about healing herbs. I agreed. I bring St. John's wort, thyme, dried mint leaves, and explain that a tasty tea can treat as reliably as a strong medicine, because it is important not only the substance, but also the care with which it is prepared. Before I go to bed, I pick up my guitar and play the ripples of my fingers. Each chord tells me that I'm growing slowly but surely. And in the silence between the notes I hear, the house has finally become home, and I have become me. Tomorrow, I'll get up early again, brew coffee in the same mug that Daddy used to drink. I'll open the window wide, let the morning air in, and I'll say to the new day, "Hello, I'm ready."
Любі глядачі, дякую вам за перегляд, ставте лайки та підписуйтесь на канал. Також напишіть в коментарях, чи погоджуєтесь ви з Дженніфер, чи вона мала розказати все матері, чи ні, чи мала все розказати своєму коханцю щодо свого чоловіка, чи ні. І також прокоментуйте, чи вам сподобалось це відео.